Podcasting from the Chicagoland area, this is Game On with Jackson Stuart, where we discuss men's lifestyle, focusing on sex, fitness, relationships, business, and more. We'll be interviewing the best of the best, the hot shots, and the rising stars in the worlds of modeling, fitness, cooking, and more. Influencers who are discussing keeping it sexy while at the top of their game. I'm your host, Jackson Stuart. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the game. What if you could be a better player for the cost of one more cup of coffee a month? Get access to a growing library of lit erotica, behind-the-scenes action, and player's guides with tips on drinking, cooking, fitness, dating, sex, and life after dark. Low tier rate while offer lasts. Patreon.com. Game On with Jack. Keep it sexy and game on.
This is Risque, and you're listening to Game On with Jackson Stuart.
Communication is part of the game, and a true player is good at not only getting their point across, but receiving the messages and meanings of others. But the game can be divisive, and in no greater place than the discussion of politics. Our guest this evening is here to walk us through it. Cory Nathan was raised in an observant Jewish household, attending an Orthodox synagogue. Cory grew up on the Jersey side in Bruce Springsteen country. In his late 20s, Nathan converted to Christianity and began his path on bridging gaps. A stockbroker by trade, Nathan continues to be a student of theology, politics, and culture, and enjoys sharing invigorating conversations with world-renowned experts of these subjects on his podcast, Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. Cory Nathan is also our guest this evening on Game On with Jackson Stuart. All right, guys, you've heard the introduction and the bio. Now join me in welcoming to Game On the thoughtful, the engaging Cory Nathan. Cory, how you doing?
I am doing great, Jackson. It's so good to be with you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'm super excited about today's topic. Can you let the audience know where to find you and on like what social media platforms and by what username?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I have the platforms for myself, which is Cory S. Nathan, Corey S as in Sam, Nathan, like the hot dogs, Cory S. Nathan. But you can also find us on our Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. That's TPNR Pod, TPANDR Pod. And we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, what else? Instagram and TikTok. We're on TikTok.
Now, where'd you grow up, Cory, and where are you from, and where'd you grow up if it's two different places?
Yeah, so I'm from the old country, which is Brooklyn. So all my family's from Brooklyn, but I grew up more on the Jersey side. Older people like me will remember the song My Hometown, the Bruce Springsteen song.
Okay.
Which is actually my hometown. That's the Freehold area of central New Jersey, about 15 minutes from the shore.
Oh man, so we got you. So we got a New York guy with us.
Yeah, New York with a little bit of Jersey in me. So yeah, but that was a great area. Bruce was about 25 years older than me. But we grew up, there was about 2 towns north of me and maybe 5 or 10 years older than me was Bon Jovi and his crew. And then a lot closer in age and 2 towns the other way were the guys, and I don't know who knows these bands, but like, the Blues Traveler.
Oh yeah.
John Popper.
Yeah.
Great harmonica player. Yeah. In fact, we just had him on our program about a month ago. He's awesome. So yeah, great towns, great area. Like I said, we got the shore down there, Rutgers and Princeton bars. So I really enjoyed growing up in that area.
On a side note, for people who do not know, that John Popper is probably, he's got an amazing voice. Anybody that, remembers Blues Traveler, Hook and Girl Inside My Head.
Yeah.
But aside from his voice, I don't think he ever got or gets enough props for his harmonica skill. He's got to be one of the great harmonica players of all time. And I would.
He absolutely is.
I think that would stand up in anybody's argument. But so we got a Brooklyn kid who goes from Now, did you grow up there like all through adulthood, or did you move around and live in a different spot?
No, no. Like I said, my family's from Jersey.
Okay.
Excuse me, my family is from Brooklyn, but I'm mostly from the Jersey side. So,
Gotcha.
Monmouth County, Freehold area. So yeah, most of my youth from grade school through high school was in that area. But I moved around a bit. Once I was 17, 18 years old, I moved around a bit. I lived in Northern California for a bit. I traveled around down south, which is where I met my wife. And then we moved out here to Southern California about in 1995. So I've been out here a long time.
So how do we get how do we get a Brooklyn kid out in SoCal who suddenly decides that, people need to discuss politics in a much more civil and loving way than what we're known for doing? How do you make that leap?
Well, that's an interesting question because, a lot of us native New Yorkers, we have this reputation for being, rough around the edges. The thing is, it's an interesting comparison because I find that, I guess a good way to put it is that in New York, you got to be up against each other all the time, whether you're on the subway or walking out on the street. Even in Jersey, it's, a lot of us have that ethos about us. But the thing is, a lot of people might come across as kind of tough-skinned or thick-skinned, but underneath, we really got soft hearts. We got to figure out how to live with each other, how to be with each other, how to be around each other. Whereas you get out here in LA, everybody's in their cars, the freeways. We're surrounded by this imaginary, insulation, or actually, so it's not imaginary. It's an actual, this tin can that we're in all the time and not called our cars, and we're not connecting with each other. So what happens is instead of thick-skinned and soft-hearted, you can get really thin-skinned and hard-hearted. So I think that dichotomy, that dynamic defines a lot of how we've become and the events sociologically over the last decade, couple decades actually, have exacerbated those tendencies. I'm talking about social media. If we're only throwing rhetorical lobs at each other, and oftentimes we're doing it behind these anonymous profiles, I'm Twitter number 12345, but not any humanity that I'm representing, then I don't risk the possibility of having to be accountable for what I say. Similarly, like if you're in your car on the freeway and you flip somebody off, you don't risk the possibility of having to be accountable, even if it's somebody possibly punching you in the nose for what you say, if it's something stupid or offensive. Whereas if we're up against each other, we at least risk that possibility. And what I would say is if you are in relationship with someone, then you can go deeper. You can push those issues further and deeper, even if you figure out that at the end of the day you don't agree on something. Because you can't just be willy-nilly with what you say. You have to account for another human being in front of you, and that other person has to account for your humanity. They're in front of you. There's no way around it. So my own life story lends itself to some of this because I've put myself in situations where I've been at great odds on theological and political issues, but I never really thought about it until you asked it that way, the East Side versus West Side thing, East Coast versus West Coast thing, or New York versus LA thing. But I think there is some of those ingredients working in this recipe.
And I've been fortunate and blessed to know people from New York, people from California, and in between that gap. And there is there's good people everywhere, good people of all walks of life and places, but the warmth of a good New Yorker is, let me see if I can say this right. It's almost like you got to earn it a little bit. There's a little bit of protectiveness when you deal with somebody from the Big Apple and the Big Apple area. Once you get past it, they're ride or die. Like you've been embraced and accepted. California, good people that I've met there, but it's a little bit different where the warmth is there out front, but underneath there's a layer of protection. So there is kind of like an opposite in the way both people present that. And I could not agree with you more. And I really want people to think about this. And interestingly enough, we've talked about this whenever we've talked to models and cam room models. Guys, do not give into the false power given by anonymity, by keyboard distance, by driving in a car past somebody. Don't think that just because you're not in front of a person who you have to make eye contact and be accountable with, that gives you the right to be a jackass, because it doesn't. And I think that that's a true sign of maturity. Cory, like what you just pointed out, is that accountability should be there whether you're inside your car or you're face to face with somebody.
Yeah.
And
yeah, for sure.
And you know, there's no greater pathway towards accountability like connection, I think. And so, who are some of your influences? Because you've crossed theological moats, so to speak, or gaps, and socio-political gaps. Who are some of the people that you've read or that you have followed that have, made that pathway easier for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do read pretty voraciously, and it's reading that was the main activity that ultimately brought me to where I am theologically now. I grew up in we went to an Orthodox synagogue. I grew up Jewish, and I became a Christian when I was 29 years old. So, a lot of my time in that season a number of years ago was spent reading. So some of the early writers and thinkers that really, really resonated with me, C.S. Lewis, who a lot of people like for his Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, or that whole series. But he has a whole bunch of other theological and what's called apologetics work that, sorry, that's Charles Mingus III. We were going to talk about some jazz.
Yeah, that's right.
He's named after Charles Mingus III. Sorry about that. Charlie. But actually, I should say that there are jazz musicians who are immensely influential. I mean, a living jazz great, Wynton Marsalis, just his thinking and how he uses music as a way to talk about religious things and political things, and his music speaks to that. Jazz is a representation of democracy at its best. Jazz, in a way, when it's done, there's this submission to the score, the submission to the composition, but also the freedom of the individuals who are all playing in that score amongst each other, amongst other virtuosos. So he's very much an influence. Marsalis and other great virtuosos. Other influences, there's a guy named N.T. Wright, Tom Wright, great historian, great theologian, who early on in my time as a Christian, sorry, I just walked upstairs with the dog to try to settle him down. But Tom Wright did a lot of great history work as an academic. I think he's in Oxford. He might be a Cambridge guy, actually. But he helped me understand and place myself imaginatively in first century Israel when the events of Jesus walking the earth and his ministry, his earthly ministry, was all going on. So I could imagine myself there more readily with all that history work that he did. So he's a big influence. But also there were a number of other people of varying degrees that also were great apologists. So not like, hey, I'm sorry kind of apologist, but apologist meaning being able to make a ready defense for the hope that's within you. And the style that I defer to is with gentleness and respect, or winsomeness and respect. So there are a number of other scholars, thinkers, speakers, apologists that have really helped me figure out, like early on, explain to my Jewish family why I believed in this Jesus thing, or later on when I got involved in churches, I found one of the problems wasn't necessarily theological. It was there's a lot of cultural identifiers, cultural priorities that aren't necessarily based on the Bible. It's like I walked in and everybody was, or in recent years, it's more obvious, like a lot of Christians, for whatever reason, are all Trump all day, every day, and I just I don't know, this isn't reckoning with what I'm reading in Scripture. So just being able to have conversations who are just diehard Trump fans, not that I'm pretty conservative actually, but like Trump to me just isn't conservative politically, or certainly, I mean, he's like the anti-scripture, anti-Bible. There couldn't be, anyway, that's a whole other conversation, but being able to have a conversation with somebody who is a big Trump fan, just being like, having that equipment, having the equipment of someone who can engage in important conversations, in a meaningful way, in a relationship building way, in a redeeming way, as opposed to how a lot of those conversations tend to go. So yeah, those were, I kind of went off the track here in terms of influences, but influences have very real practical impact on day-to-day important stuff. So
now here you've crossed religious barriers, you've crossed political barriers. What are three challenges, and you host a successful podcast, what are three challenges for you in your day-to-day routine? Cory Nathan gets up X time in the morning, does this, does that. What are three challenges that you have find consistent in all of this barrier jumping that you've done, and done it without killing people, as is the topic of your show?
Are you talking about for me personally, or specific subjects or topics that have come up that have been challenging on a regular basis?
I would say personally, because I think a lot of people find themselves in similar situations. I don't think maybe to the scale that you have courageously taken on, but I think some people find themselves, mom or dad follow this politician. I disagree, but it comes up at dinner. But what are three challenges that you have found when it comes to barrier crossing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I might get a little bit more personal than might be comfortable for folks, but I'll put it in three buckets. One is, I'll call it this, help me understand. This doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. So that's one bucket. The second bucket, which is kind of related, is frankly, it's mental health. I've never been more keenly aware of how important mental health is and how fragile my own is. And then the third is related to that, which is proclivities that I have that are directly related to my mental health, or ways that I've dealt, some in healthy ways, other ways not so healthy, in order to figure out what's going on mentally and emotionally. So what I mean is, the first bucket being, this doesn't make sense. I described one before, like, hey, I believe in the Bible. I believe the Bible is authoritative. Maybe not the way that other people do, like they just take it as literature and it's nothing more. Then there's some others who read every word and every tittle as like the literal, and I just don't think that's a very good way to read it, or frankly, to be faithful to the Bible. But I do believe the Bible is authoritative. So for example, it says the fruit of the Spirit, or these good virtues that we should have, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. And when a lot of my buddies from church are all in on Trump, I'm like, he is none of those things. Or the Bible also talks about these 7 things, these 6, no, these 7, the Lord hates. It literally says that these 6 things, no, 7, which was like a literary, it was a tool that sometimes poets used back then. And it talks about these things that just aren't good in the sight of God. And Trump, it's amazing how accurately that describes Trump's words, actions, and character. So we come across virtually every page of the Bible, and it's screaming out against this Trump character. And it says to me, like, I just don't understand how we're all buying in on this guy. And it's not just Trump. I don't need to focus on that, but that's something that it's a frame of reference that everybody is very familiar with. So I use that as just one, but it could be any number of things, like how we treat immigrants, how we treat widows and orphans. Like, I see the Bible saying one thing, and a lot of my brothers and sisters in church have decided that, this Fox News crowd is really better for me, so I'm going to go with them, even though I know it says that in the Bible, or it doesn't really say that in the Bible. I'm going to get a different translation. It's the Sean Hannity translation. So, not to pick on Fox News fans or Trump fans too much, but it's just something I struggle with. Like, I'm an Orthodox Christian now. Like, it's just something like, help me understand. So that also, because it also affects us. If it really means something to us, it affects us on multiple levels.
Right.
It says the greatest commandment is love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's describing us, our humanity. We have heart, soul, mind, and strength. We have heart. We have emotions. We have soul. We have the sense of transcendence in us. Mind. We think. And strength. We feel things. We palpably feel things. Right? So it transcends, like when something is that important to me, I feel it on all those levels, to the degree that I start to tweak out mentally. And listen, the last couple of years, we've all been trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. So like, a lot of us have been becoming more keenly aware of our mental health. So it affects me on that level on a day-to-day basis. And I've been trying to do things, trying to accrue good habits, to maintain mental health, not just my physical health, like eating good and working out. But I'll tell you what, man, like over a lifetime, I have fallen prey to certain proclivities. Like there have been seasons in my life where I drank too much. Bottom line, there have been seasons in my life where I gave in to, angry fits. There have been seasons in my life where there was any number of things that just weren't good. They weren't healthy. They weren't godly. So, in order to try to numb the pain, in order to try to deal with what's going on in my head, in order to try, and sometimes I deal with it in a healthier way than others, but every day it's a dogfight. Some of us it's easier. We get up, we eat our celery, we go for our 10-mile run, we read Aristotle, and then we make our 100 sales calls, and then,
Yeah.
we have our Leave It to Beaver moment with our wife and our kids. And it's a very picture of like perfect lived out, the perfect picture of how, the American dream, if you will. For me, I don't know, man. It ain't that easy. It's a dogfight to do the right thing sometimes. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the things that come to mind.
Well, I think, I think that the honesty is real. And I think more people wake up in a dogfight than not. And I think even people who, I think I'm coming up on some like 75 guests or something like that over the course of the show. But even the people, and this is probably one of the reasons why I like interviewing people, because people see you as an expert. They can see you on podcasts, and they might think that you wake up and that you're doing the Leave It to Beaver, morning, and you do the 10-mile run. And when you talk about the honesty of it, I think that, like in the terms of connecting with people from a different standpoint of life or belief, that's doing it because you're being honest. And I think a lot of people feel like, oh, if I don't wake up and have a perfect morning and I run my 10 miles and drink my kale juice, I'm a failure. People who are out there crushing it, people who are influencers, people who are out there, being entrepreneurs and business people, they're still waking up doing a dogfight just like you. It's just, it's different, but it's still a dogfight. Yeah.
I have to say, and this is related to another question that you asked, is that I wish we were all more candid with each other, not to encourage each other to fall prey to our proclivities or to make it okay to live a sinful or harmful life, whether you're harming yourself or others or both. But I think if we were more candid about it, if we were more raw with each other when necessary and had some support for like just being human, learning how to be a better human, but human better.
Right.
We all have to people better. So it's related to something that you asked before, because one of my mentors, somebody that I became very close with, is a guy named Ravi Zacharias. And he's very well known in the Christian community. He's probably, before he died almost exactly 2 years ago, he was arguably the world's most renowned apologist. Very erudite guy, very smart, accomplished. Well, after his death, it came out that Ravi was a serial sexual predator. There were a number of women, in particular massage parlors, that he used his position to take advantage of them. And I had no idea. A lot of us had no idea. And it's very painful. It's still very painful for me. And obviously there were other victims, not just the victims themselves, but their families and other people that it affected all around them. But I also think about Ravi, like he didn't have, when we screw up, like, listen, I'll admit to the fact that I had an unfortunate lap dance incident here and there, but like, not that that's the picture of like saintly behavior,
Right.
But like everybody was willing participants in that situation.
It's a far cry from what he had done in his life. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge difference. Yeah.
But also it's like, I could see where that decision could lead to other, for a guy like me too, where, I mean, I don't know, I could see where it could lead to other things, and that would be much more destructive to my marriage, to, my life as a husband, my responsibilities as a husband and a father, but I had other good friends around me where I could be like, that was fun, fellas, but like, that's not the kind of thing that I want to indulge in here, because it could just go down a bad path. Whereas I think a guy like Ravi didn't have the permission from himself or others or the support system around him to stop that thing before it started. He couldn't afford to look even remotely sinful, So I could see where somebody could go down that path if we're not being candid with each other, if we're not being real with each other. Like when I hear guys get up and like, hey guys, let's get real. Let's talk about where we're falling short. And some guy tells me he's eating too many double fudge cookies. I know he's full of crap, like,
yeah,
I'm like, really?
Right.
Like, how are you, how are you going to display, your godliness? Well, I'm not going to cuss anymore. I'm like, you're so, I can't even talk to you.
Right.
We're done having this conversation. Because first of all, I'm from, like I said, we talked about it. I'm from New York. So like, we don't cuss, we curse. Like, don't give me then I already know we're not on the same page. So anyway.
Well, I think
it's all interrelated, man.
I think there's a difference between like, superficial honesty and rawness, but rawness for the point of connectivity, right? Like there's a rawness if I'm at a bar and I order a drink and I see the bartender's just, if I pick up on the vibe that something's not right with this person I just met, and I can look at them and say, hey, are you okay? And he or she might say, well, you don't want to hear my problems, but I'm worried because my kid is sick. Like, that's rawness. And then, I could say, or they might say, well, my mom is sick. And I'm like, wow, my mom was sick not too long ago. Like, well, what's wrong? Like, that is us now being raw, but for the sake of connectivity.
Yeah.
And I think that goes
absolutely.
back to, excuse me, the whole point of, not the whole point, but the foundation of your show, if I can be so bold to make that leap, is that we can connect without hating each other if we connect on a level that surpasses our politics and things like that. Like, we're all human. I don't care if you're red, blue, conservative, liberal, right, left, middle, whatever. At the end of the day, everybody just wants to make it to midnight. I always say, I want to either make it to midnight or I want to make it to 11:59. Like, give me enough to give you that. And you want, if you got kids, you want them safe. If you got family, you want them to be all right. And you just want to be able to go to bed in safety. And there's not a creature on the earth that wants that does not want that, regardless of what they believe in or who they vote for. And I think that if we connect on that raw level, then a lot more relationships get built up. Cory, let me ask you something real. What's your favorite part of talking politics and religion without killing each other? What's your favorite part of the podcast?
And this is going to sound cheesy, but the entire thing.
No, I like that.
So it's so literally, even like the more mundane parts of it, it's kind of like when I was a kid, when I was a kid, for a lot of my life, I produced theater, big Broadway sized stages, little 99 seaters. And I loved being in the theater, and I loved every part of it, whether I was an actor, writer, director, producer, or literally like in those 99 seaters, oftentimes I'd be the one cleaning the toilets before the play. And I loved all of it because it was all participating in this bringing great stories to life. Similarly with podcasting, there's like inviting the guests, recording the guest, prepping to make sure that you have a good interview, a good conversation with the guest. There's a post-production, the editing, there's the social,
right now,
there's everything.
all of me is trembling at all that stuff that you just said, like, the post-production, the tracking the guest down.
Yeah. But it's all like, first of all, a lot of it was new to me. I never knew I knew a lot of editors, some of my best friends, and I've worked a long time in entertainment advertising. So there's about 200, 300, maybe 400 different people who owe me big time favors, who are the best at Avid and Final Cut and Premiere editors in the world. But I never got on the board myself. So it was intimidating for me to hop on the board. But now that I'm doing it, it's like I've learned a new language, and I love it because it's part of this thing of bringing these these important conversations to life, and being able to share it with a group of people who are interested in having these types of conversations in this way. So the editing, the social, like doing TikTok, I got gray hair, man. Like, I'm the least cool person on the face of the earth, but I'm doing TikTok because why? Because these conversations are important to have, and it's another place where other people, that's where the people are, that's where they're at. So just learning it and getting over the intimidation factor, and even the more mundane parts, like, I don't know, the editing comes to mind because that's a little bit more mundane.
Right.
Because it's a mechanical exercise. I'm a more creative guy, but somebody said, a great 20th century theologian said, Heschel said, that there's sanctity in the mundane. That's where the sanctity is, and I think there's Western or Eastern philosophies that just in the present, in the now, in the flower, in the, petting my dog, there's a sacred moment there. So I've come to embrace the mundane parts of it as well.
In the theme of leveling up, we like to give listeners takeaways, and usually I say about at least 3 takeaways that they can use. And today I want to focus on what are 3 takeaways that you could give to listeners on how to either A, up their political awareness, regardless of what side of the fence they fall on, and or you can pick both or the other, or how to level up their ability to communicate with people without it turning to just bloodshed. Like sitting at Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner or Hanukkah or whatever it is, or Ramadan, and talking to some relative or friend with opposing political views and it not killing friendship. What are 3 takeaways you could suggest people do today, right now, to alleviate that, to cut that out of their life?
Yeah. So I think 3 that come to mind right away are: be a better consumer of news. That's one, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. Be a better consumer of news. Learn the phrase, help me understand. And then 3 is focus on the relational over the transactional. So I'll talk about those 3 just a bit, because I know we're probably going over on time here, but the be a better consumer of news. Listen, there are really good journalists, really good thinkers in any number of publications. This crap about like, the MSM, you can't trust mainstream media, or they're all this, they're all that. No. It's all liberal. No. There are really good writers, really good thinkers in so many different publications, from like just reporting. There's Robert Costa in the Washington Post. There's Maggie Haberman in the New York Times. I know really good journalists in Breitbart and the Washington Times. So find those good reporters, or the thinkers, the columnists like David Brooks in the New York Times, or George Will in the Washington Post, or the Atlantic has any number of them. There's independent media outlets too, like the Dispatch and Bulwark. You can be a good, thoughtful, intelligent consumer of news, but you have to be discerning, weed out the crap, and find good writers across a diversity of perspectives. Will Salatan has a very different perspective than Peter Wehner, who writes for the Atlantic and the New York Times. that one's a longtime conservative, one's a longtime more liberal progressive, but they're both really intelligent, and it gives you a more well-rounded understanding of what's going on in the world and how to think about big important issues. So that's one. Two is help me understand. If I got into, I share this by way of a story. My kid, I have 3 kids. One of my kids, he's 18. When the vaccines first came out, he wasn't resistant, but he was hesitant. And his thinking was, I just don't want to be a science experiment. So right away, a lot of people who are much more in favor of taking the vaccine just pounced on him, shamed him, harassed him, just made him feel like a bad person. And frankly, I was one of them. And like an 18-year-old kid, he reacted the way a lot of 18-year-old kids would be like, hell with all you guys. I ain't doing it now. Forget it. And after the FDA approved the vaccines, I circled back with him and I was like, listen, man, because I was part of the dog pile and the rabbit, I lost the privilege of talking to you about it. But can I talk to you about it? He's like, no. I'm like, no. Let's try this again. It's been a few months and I am not going to say anything. I mean, I will, but what I'll say is questions, because I just want to understand where you're coming from. And that's where I learned that he was just trying to think it through for himself and come to his own conclusions, but people didn't give him the oxygen to do that. They just made him feel like an evil, terrible, awful, dumb person, and that just alienated him. So I think that if we are engaged in battle, if we come into every conversation with our dukes up, or at best come into it as like a debate or a contest and we're going to win the contest, you ain't going nowhere.
Right.
It might be satisfying to yourself. You might think kind of out of vanity that others are watching and I got to score one for my team. No, we got plenty of that and it's not doing anything.
Well, it's definitely, what you put out is what you're going to get back.
Yeah. But if you try to understand people, there's a lot more nuance to individual human beings' perspectives. And at the very least, you'll learn something, and by allowing that person to be the human being, to share their nuanced point of view, they'll be more fertile, they'll be more open for you to share yours if you get to that point. But it requires a different mindset, which is kind of the related part 3, which is if you're focusing on the transactional, like, hey, I'm going to convince you in 30 minutes or less that you are completely wrong and you're going to vote completely differently according to how I convince you to do so. That's transactional, and frankly, it ain't going to happen. But if you focus on the relational, first of all, focusing on a smaller circle of people that you can actually have some influence with and can have influence over you, those are much more meaningful. Those are much more lasting impacts that you can make. And it's more meaningful to our whole community, whereas if everything's transactional, it's just like, okay, I convinced them, it's done. How deep are those roots though? How meaningful is that? How long is that going to go? And frankly, folks who think that way, that think they're the greatest salesman on the face of the earth and can convince anybody of anything, selling ice, to an Eskimo or whatever, like they're not nearly as good as they think they are, because it doesn't happen that way. Change and influence doesn't happen that way. It happens with the relational over the transactional. So those are the 3 things. I hope that makes sense.
In keeping with the theme of sexiness, what is the sexiest thing about you?
What was sexy about me 20, 30 years ago is very different than what might be sexy about me now. If you ask my lovely bride, she might say like, there's absolutely nothing sexy about that. No, I'm just kidding. But I think, I used to be good looking. I used to have the 6-pack. I used to be, in good shape. I used to be, I don't know, maybe not quite as engaging as I am now. But here's the irony though. Understanding my own limitations, even my intelligence, like not placing a ton of weight on my own intelligence and my own good looks, my own capacity, I think in an ironic, weird, and poetic, beautiful way, maybe makes me more sexy. I don't know, maybe.
In the world of Cory Nathan, what makes a person sexy?
Oh man, I think, beauty, they say, is in the eye of the beholder. I find that there's poetry and beauty in all living things. And what we've been talking about a lot is that human connection. I think, so I'm putting it a little bit differently. I'm not saying sexy so much as beauty, but human connection and understanding the depth of individuals, the individuality of different people, and their stories. Like, I don't know, to me, that's actually pretty sexy.
It is now time for the quick game, where we like to give our guests a chance to run through some entertaining questions. Cory, are you ready?
I don't think I am, but I'll give it a whirl.
What color is your toothbrush?
Pink.
If you could be any animal, what would it be and why?
Dog. Definitely a dog. They know how to relax.
That's a good answer. What is one of the things that you would put on your bucket list?
This is going to turn the question around a little bit. To not want the things I don't have or haven't done, but to want the things that I already have. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I think that's a beautiful answer. Like, yeah, the thing on your bucket list is to appreciate the things that you have and not chase the things you don't.
Yeah.
I think this should be on all of our bucket lists. What is your favorite summer activity?
Summer activity?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, I do enjoy walking on the beach and going down to the beach because it's cooler there. So that would probably be it. To drive out to the beach and go walking there, take a stroll. But I'm not an ocean guy. I'm not a surfer guy. So it's really just to get the wind and hear the ocean and just get some of that peace going.
Because we were talking jazz before the show, and I got to get a jazz question in. Describe jazz in 3 words.
Oh, boy. Okay. Virtuosity. Oh, no. Yeah. Virtuosity, faithfulness, and companionship. Collaboration. Virtuosity, faithfulness, and collaboration.
Can you name 4 of the 7 dwarves?
Dopey, grumpy, sleepy, and Mo. I don't know.
You know what? I have asked that question. Maybe I've asked that question 10 times over the 2 seasons of Guess. Nobody has gotten it right the first time. Everybody goes. Usually they're like, "Damn it, Jackson, why you gotta ask me a question like that?" But yeah, I don't know why, but that is a question that I think because you have to go into a number sequence. And what is your favorite movie quote?
The first one that came to mind is from The Green Mile, and I don't know if I can say it on the air, but they come in and one of the guards has Coca-Cola for some of the prisoners, and one of the prisoners, he's the bad guy. He's like, I want a Coke, and the guard goes, "Why do you get a Coke?" And he goes, "Can I? It's not really a curse, but can I say it?"
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a reference to his. He goes, "Why do you get a Coke?" He goes, "Because I got a big pecker."
Last but not...
That was the first. I'm sure there are better ones, but that's the first one that came to mind.
Yeah, that's why it's the quick game. Last but not least, and probably my favorite question, who inspires you?
Oh, boy. A lot of folks that I'm with inspire me, but I draw inspiration from the resilience and openness of my lovely bride, the gal I've been married to for almost 25 years.
Nice.
I draw inspiration from my kids. They teach me something every day. I draw inspiration from folks who have been through it and are going through it. Friends of mine that, sick or financial struggles but right now, because I'm a New Yorker and 2 of my favorite teams are the Mets and the Rangers, hockey team and baseball teams, I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from the Mets and the Rangers right now. So that's all good.
Good people sexy people, that wraps up our interview today with the thoughtful and the deep and the wildly entertaining Cory Nathan. Cory, let people know one more time where they can find you.
Thanks, Jackson. I really appreciate that. So the podcast is super easy to find. The easiest way is politicsendreligion.us. It's politicsendreligion.us. You can find me personally on all the Twitters and socials at Cory S. Nathan, Corey, S as in Sam Nathan, Cory S. Nathan, or the podcast at TP and R Pod, TP and R Pod. So, yeah, hope to engage with folks out there.
Cory, thank you one more time, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good, Jackson. I really appreciate getting to know you a little bit, and the conversation was great. Hope we do it again.
All right, take care.
Don't got time for games. Now what you wanna do? Tell me now if you will go with me all the way. Every night, every day, promise will never change. Are you gonna love me?